Skipper Scope, how you going, brother?
The Beak. Thanks for having me on here, mate. And I know what the listeners are thinking. When a player or ex-player with the calibre of Cameron Smith is not available, you probably reach out to at least another 250 ex-NRL players, but you got 251, and I am here today for the captain's run, mate, and really humbled to be a part of such a huge show here at SEN. We got Cameron Smith,
mate. It's almost
sitting up at the back here with the Beak.
It's
this is
almost
as good as it gets.
offensive that me and you are here and Cameron Smith is not on his show. Two absolute battlers in the NRL compared to the greatest of all time. Mate, Stefano leaving the Tigers. Tigers press release on Monday confirmed that Stefano will leave the club. CEO Shane Richardson told the Telegraph the club want people that are in for the fight. The Daily Telegraph reported yesterday that the Tigers offered Utoikamanu $800,000 a year, 5 seasons, with Canterbury and Melbourne lodging lesser offers. Around $700K. Now, that's all just reported, guys. That's not confirmed or locked in. That's just a rough area of where he's going to land in regards to pay, whether it's a $900 to $700K mark. The same report claims that Illawarra and Canberra, who initially chased Stefano, were preparing an offer of $900,000 a year. Also, Shane Richardson was quoted saying that they're in a crocodile role at the moment. We've been discussing this in the green room before the show. We're actually unsure.
Have you got the definition for a crocodile roll for me, please, Kempy? Because I was asking you pre-show, mate.
Okay, here we go.
Because he rolled with it about 4 or 5 times.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's definitely the mantra now at the Tigers, the crocodile roll.
I wonder, like, crocodiles and a tiger, who wins in a fight? Because, you are a tiger. You could have used a tiger.
True. But if the crocodile's rolling, I think he's going with the crocodile.
So crocodilians, including the alligator, perform a spinning maneuver to subdue and dismember prey. The spinning maneuver, which is referred to as the death roll, involves rapid rotation about the longitudinal axis of the body. So I'm unsure as to, are the tigers the one currently being crocodile rolled, or are they the crocodiles rolling someone else?
All I know is that Stefano isn't doing any rolling of any sort. He wants out of the crocodile roll.
He's done.
He's gone.
Not a big crocodile guy.
No, he's not a big crocodile roll guy, Stefano. So.
Okay. I'd love to know. Richo, reach out. Call in 1300 01 1170. Are you the crocodile roller or rollee?
Can we get the listeners to call in as well or text us in? Tigers fans, are you willing to roll with the crocodiles as well? Are you willing to get low and roll with the crocodiles like Richo is asking players that want to be there? And obviously Stefano's not one of them. He's going to be moving on. You read out the reports there with regards to, it seems like the Dogs have hit the front. They look like they're a prime candidate to pick him up. They're playing a very different style of footy this year because of the forward pack that they having a smaller forward pack with the likes of Max King, Josh Curran, these sort of guys who have been playing up front. Probably the biggest guy is the rookie, Sam Hughes. So they've always been looking for a big... Anytime a front row has hit the market, they've been a team that have been tossed up. So it does make a lot of sense. I know the Storm have been keen on Stefano for about a year now, ever since they were made aware of the
Storm
contract
have been keen
clause.
On a big boy for a while now. They went pretty hard after Tino before he signed his long extension with the Titans.
Yep.
And now they're going after Stefano. And I guess that is one part of the Storm's pack. I know Nelson is considered a big body, but outside of Nelson, they've got good battler forwards like Kamakamitha and Welsh, but not necessarily an explosive front rower that can play 40, 50 minutes. So the Stefano one's really interesting because... and guys, we'll get to the Blaize Talagi news as well and the Toto news because, absolutely massive news that will send shockwaves throughout the transfer market. The interesting thing about Stefano that I get a bit frustrated at is that, with a lot of young players, guys that analyse the game or girls that analyse the game, they go, 5 years ago it was like, I can't believe Luke Brooks has just taken $1 million and battling away at the Tigers. Why doesn't he go to a better club on lesser money to prove himself? So Stefano, as a young forward, makes the decision of, you know what, I'm going to take less money to go to another club to be the better version of myself that I can be. Because currently in this environment, I'm not getting... And then all of a sudden, now it's, how come you don't stay with the battling club? You're not going to stay for the battle. It's like the players can't win. In one instance, it's like, you're just staying there because you're a big fish in a little pond.
Yep.
And then when you leave, all of a sudden you're a little fish in a big pond, and you're not willing to stay with the battler side. It's like either way, you're getting, you're getting back.
Lose.
Yeah.
In a situation like this, right? And I'll give you an example with the Luke Brooks situation. So Fox League did a post the other day about all the players that hadn't played finals yet, and it's obviously Brooksy's right up the top. And I, write a comment off the back of it. It shows, the perseverance that he's had to continually fight through for, near close to 10 plus years, not play finals footy, still keep backing up and going again. One of the comments straight away, and I knew it was coming. Must be. I think he would have felt all right because he was on $1 million per season for all those years.
Yeah.
For those that aren't aware, this is, the players get paid a lot more, and Luke Brooks got paid more than I ever would have dreamed of during my career. But 3 losses on 200,000 compared to 3 losses in a row on 500,000 or even $1 million, they still feel the same.
Oh.
And when you add all of them up and compound all of those into not only losing 3 games, but losing 3 seasons, multiple seasons, and not playing finals. I do have some sympathy for Stefano. I do have some sympathy for the Tigers, though. And my sympathy towards them is I feel like they're starting to get some of the things right that I had my dramas with for a long time at the club. I think Shane Richardson is the right guy. I like, we took the mickey a little bit out of the crocodile role there, but a lot of his messaging, I've liked a lot of it since he's arrived. I like that he's in unison with Benji. I still want to give Benji a full 2 years before, similar to what Cameron Ciraldo got at the Dogs for me, when people were calling for, the Bulldogs fans were calling for his neck early on when they weren't getting results immediately. It's like, hold up, let's give him at least 18 months before we judge him on that. So I guess that's the frustrating part for me for the Tigers. But I can see both sides in it. If I'm Stefano and I'm looking at examples of 2 guys that are at the team that I follow now, and Tommy Talau and Luke Brooks, and then also down south with Sean Bloor at the Melbourne Storm, I'm thinking, am I getting the best out of myself here at this club? Or I'm looking at those guys who look like they are playing so much better and so much more consistently than they were at the Tigers last year.
Well, I think it's a bit mixed messaging from the Tigers, though, because, it was an open secret that they were over in England, 2 months ago, basically saying we're shopping our players around. So it's like, on one hand, when you want the player, it's, we only want players that are here for the battle. On the other hand, you're literally currently shopping players around. And it's just like, as I said, I understand how it might be disappointing for the Tigers. But at the end of the day, like, the reason why they're in this mess is because of what they've done over the last few years as an administration. Like, I don't blame Stefano at all. He has been there for, 4 or 5 years now? Now, also, like, I understand the argument where people go, well, Stefano hasn't been the best player on the field each week at the Tigers, so why is he such a hot property? I get that. I do, because you compare it to, say, a Payne Haas, and you go, well, Payne Haas at the Broncos, when the Broncos were struggling, he was always the best player on the field.
Yep.
But in saying that, like, at the Tigers, who has really played their best rugby league over a long period of time in the last decade at the Tigers? Like, has anyone, like, you even look at a guy like Dream Buller, killed it last year, relatively quiet this year. Guy like Galvinus came out. He's played really well this year. Even he had some issues and wanted to leave early this year.
Yep.
And so I don't know. People that are trying to project that the problem is the Stefano rather than, it's actually, in my opinion, the Tigers. They're the ones with the problem that needs to get sorted rather than Stefano, which they are doing. I do believe Shane Richardson, his pedigree, his resume is incredible, and I do like a bullish leader that is willing to, at the very least, come out and have interviews and let the fans know how he feels about certain things. I do think sometimes with clubs that are struggling, when you have a CEO in the background that you don't really hear from them, you don't really know what's going on, it can be hard as a fan to kind of engage. What I like about Richo is that whether you agree or disagree with what he's saying, at least he's saying something. At least he's giving the fans something to kind of go, okay, we've got a, we can latch onto that, we've got a direction, we've got a purpose. I do think that the Jerome Luai, we all look at the negative things that the admin at the Tigers have done recently, but the positive thing is Jerome Luai, they signed him, 12 months ago? I mean, he's probably added an extra $300,000 or $400,000 onto his contract over the last 12 months. That's been an incredibly shrewd signing by the Tigers.
Yeah. Well, look, you could argue that now he is playing to the value that they signed him at.
Yeah.
Right? I think a lot of people were looking at that contract to begin with, and it was more of a projection because the answer that we all wanted, that we thought we might not see until next year, was can Jerome Luai play 7 and control the team? Because every time Nathan's been out, they've had guys that have filled in, like Jack Coggo, like Sean O'Sullivan, that have played that role at the Penrith Panthers. I love the fact that he got to play it this year, and he probably played his best footy. He's having a career best year.
Easy.
And now that money, even though I still like the contract regardless, because I could see the projection, I could see why they were paying to get a player not only of that talent on the field, but also to rebuild the culture that's desperately needing some leadership, like Stephen Crichton, what Stephen Crichton has done at the Bulldogs. I was always a fan of the contract. Now I love it even more after the Origin series. I love it even more after the time that Jerome played at 7 during the Origin series for Penrith. And I love it even more if he can convince his mate on the wing,
which we'll get to,
which we'll get to in a bit, who has reported, that he's a bit unhappy at the moment. It would be unders. If he can manage to somehow convince his mate to come over, the contract that he is on now would be unders, and we'll get to that a little bit later on.
I'll tell you what, the Jerome Luai, the initial $1.2 million, reportedly, not 100% confirmed, but let's just roll with that number. The initial price, that was a market pressure price. That was, we're a desperate club. We need a guy that's experienced in winning premierships. On the market right now, there's probably not that many players. Jerome Luai fits the bill the most to what we need right now. Whereas if you're a top-tier club, you probably wouldn't pay $1 million at the time for Jerome Luai. This past 12 months has proven even a top-tier club would probably pay about $1 million for Jerome Luai.
100%.
Because he has literally at the tippity top of the game in New South Wales delivered in something that, even at the moment, Cleary hasn't delivered such a performance in such a big moment. Not to suggest that Luai is a better player than Cleary, but at the end of the day, in the big moments, he's delivered. And so what I love about, and the Tigers deserve a massive rap, is that, we always jump on them when they do the wrong thing and they sign players for overs and the contract is a bad contract. We need to applaud them when they did the shrewd thing and they saw something in Luai a lot of us didn't see. Because when they signed him for $1.2 million, I was like, I didn't see him as a 7. I was like, I don't see him as a player that can lead a team around. But clearly the Tigers had seen something that we hadn't, because I just didn't see it. The last 12 months, there's an argument to be made he's a better 7 than 6.
Yeah, well. There was only a short example of it, was playing for Samoa, where he controlled that team. And I just seen enough. The one thing, we've sort of gone a little bit off topic with Stefano here and gone to Jerome, but the one thing, the one reason I thought Jerome has always deserved a lot more praise is the lack of ego, because everyone always talked about when Jerome and Nathan were coming through, Jerome was the guy. And Nathan was a slow build. And then obviously Nathan became Nathan and completely controlled the team. But Jerome was the guy and controlled a lot of the footy in the juniors. Then he gets to a point where obviously Nathan goes to a whole new level, and that system is so good, and he's not getting credit for three consecutive grand finals.
Well, not only is he not getting credit, he's getting your nothing without Nathan. He grew up getting told, he grew up going, I'm the man, and Nathan's my sidekick. Now, all of a sudden, he's getting told, you actually nothing without Nathan Cleary.
What about the grand final? The grand final, he goes off. He carries that shoulder injury. Anyone else, that's as tough as it comes. No one gives Jerome credit for that. No. He struggles to finish the game, and then everyone just keeps raving about, it was all Jack Cogger.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So this whole 3-4 year period that the Panthers have been really good in, he's had to, for the way that everyone perceives him, he's got probably less ego out of anyone in that team in the role that he's played there. Yep. So again, we're obviously big fans of Jerome, and again, this is sort of the frustrating thing for me if I'm a Tigers fan, and from an outsider looking in and wanting the Tigers, because I don't like seeing teams stay down the bottom for as long as they are. So I want to see the Tigers.
Well, how good's it been the Bulldogs?
So good.
Yeah.
Even the Dragons, mate.
Yeah.
I've really enjoyed watching the Dragons this year as well.
Yeah.
And that's why I was like, Steph, could you have waited a year? But again, he's been inside those 4 walls now for 3 or 4 years, so he's seen all the going ons. and he's made a decision, and good on him. Whatever he decides, I'll be happy for him, and he's going to get paid. He's going to get paid accordingly because despite what everyone thinks about him, he does have the potential to become a top 10 front rower in the competition.
Yeah, just quickly with that, before we head to a break, for a lot of listeners, when you see the $700,000, you have to remember the salary cap went up 25%. So that is like a $500,000 player in the old salary cap. And it'll take us a few years to adjust to that. Remember when we started seeing $1 million players and we were all sitting there mind-blowing going, you are like, there's only one player worth $1 million. His name's Nathan Cleary. So just for the audience listening, $700K is like $500K in the old salary cap. Yep. So Stefano on $700K is even if you are paying on potential, is a bloody good buy. Welcome back to the Captain's Run. Press release this morning from the Eels. Blaize Talagi and his management have informed the club that he will be accepting an offer elsewhere, meaning 2024 will be his final season with the Parramatta Eels CEO. He said the club made a very strong offer to Blaize, provided a clear path for his football future, and consistently made it clear to Blaize and his family that we wanted him to be part of the club long term. While we are disappointed, particularly given the opportunities provided to Blaize during his time at the club, we wish him all the best. Look, I can understand Eels fans being a bit disappointed. I can also understand Blaize going, the club's not in the best position right now. A new coach is coming in. I got a good offer. I think this is almost just like both parties didn't really work out, go their separate ways. I don't really feel like there's any kind of villain in this scenario or someone's done anything egregious or wrong. It's not like he's breaking contract early. He's doing everything by the law, young Blaize. And also I can respect the Eels by not having to, like the fact that it took this long for this decision to happen suggests to me that Blaize was potentially asking for a bit more money or a specific position, because otherwise, why would it take this long? The decision would have been made earlier. So I can understand, Blaize probably wanting more money, but understanding that the Eels have got money tied up in their key positions, and also they've got their key positions most likely sorted. And I can also understand the Eels going, you know what, unfortunately, we just don't have the cash to spend on an outside back right now, especially when we just bought Zach Lomax. So I don't think there's really any villain in this scenario, and I think it's both parties have handled themselves pretty well, and I'm excited to see where Blaize ends up.
Yeah, it's quite a tricky one, isn't it? He's a young guy who has shown some real signs of potential for the Parramatta Eels, but he's still so green, so early in his career. He's still so young. So the Parramatta Eels are in a really tricky position for all those reasons you mentioned. Pardon me. They've got so many. They're very top heavy, and due to the success of the year that they had in 2022, during that period, up the likes of Dylan Brown and Mitch Moses in particular. Those are the two main guys. They sort of found or were able to get a player of talent in Jermaine Hopgood from Penrith Panthers. And then there were guys in the front row and in the middle, Big Junes, Regan Campbell-Gillard. Gutho was already done up until that point on a very significant back-ended contract, which goes up a percentage. A lot of these players have percentage contracts. What's the name for that? They've got a name, the specific
ratchet.
name. A ratchet, yeah, a ratchet clause. So it's a really tough one. I gather for sure that they would love to have kept Blaize, because there have been moments in games where you're like,
yeah, you can see it.
This kid's got something. But there are a number of other teams that are struggling in the outside backs, and pretty much it was all but done. It seems like when they signed Zach, and Zach now looks like he's another player. At the time, people were like, "Oh, he's getting paid pretty good money coming from the Dragons. They haven't been that successful." Now that contract looks great after the back of his Origin series.
Yeah,
but unfortunately, they can't keep Blaize.
And I think also, from Blaize Talagi's perspective, like they're on the bottom of the ladder. Like I think we get a bit, we're getting a bit. When you say, "Oh, Blaize," you've got this great halves pairing, you've got this great fullback to learn off, which I do believe that is true. But the reality from Blaize's perspective is if the club is saying to him, "We're a really good club, and that's why you should take a little bit less than what you can get elsewhere," in reality, it's like, well, hang on a sec. Like, let's say there's a club right now that that can pay me essentially the same, but is a top 4 club, because there's now whispers that there's Penrith that are involved. You always got the Roosters that would have money. in the salary cap. So if from Blaize's perspective, you're probably sitting there going, well, look, if we're going to sign a contract that's unders, why wouldn't I go to a club that's actually at the top of the table rather than a club that says that we have the roster to be at the top of the table? And I think that's really hurt the Eels this year is the fact they've gone so poorly. I believe that, let's say they had a year where they made the 8, I reckon Blaize probably does stay because it's more appealing. Whereas at the moment, they've got a new coach coming in, they're bottom of the table. And so, yeah, the weight of we're a good club, therefore you should take unders because we've spent our money elsewhere in certain positions, just doesn't hold that much weight in reality. And so I can understand if that is the reason. I will say from the Eels' perspective, though, I am glad that they didn't. If this is the case where he was demanding a lot, like a starting fullback role with starting fullback money, I actually think it's pretty smart from the Eels to go, you know what? No, we've got some proven players in key positions like Gutho. Also, Zach Lomax as well. Like, Lomax.
That's true.
You know what I mean? Like, you've got a Zach Lomax coming to the club on about $650K, reportedly, which is unders to what you get now. And so they're probably going, look, as talented as Blaize is, he's extremely talented. We can all see that. He still hasn't really achieved anything in the game. Whereas Zach Lomax has gone into Origin, done what he did. Gutho has played in Origin. And so I can understand why the Eels also stood firm in that contract negotiation.
And going back to Blaize specifically too, when you're in these sort of situations and, the club is going to you, look, we really want to keep you. We don't have the money right now. We could be able to fix you up on the back end. Sometimes players stay around if their gang's there. Yeah. Like you think about the crew that he's come through with. Matt Arthur has been given an opportunity to look elsewhere due to family reasons, which I applaud from all camps.
Yeah.
A very unique situation which happened with his old man, Brad. And the other one is Ethan Sanders, another guy who he come through. Blaize, Ethan Sanders and Matt Arthur, they all come through together in the Parramatta Juniors and were quite successful from what I'd seen. And, two of his probably best mates are not going to be a part of the squad as well. So if you are going to indeed take unders, that's probably a little bit more appealing if you know that you could potentially come through with your crew and then at the back end make up the money that you might have missed out on at the front.
Yeah. So as I said, I can understand both parties. I can understand Blaize looking at it and go, look, if I'm taking unders, I'll go to a top tier side currently. And I can understand the Eels going, look, we've already got an Origin outside back in Zach Lomax. We can't afford to put more money into that kind of position. So I think that I cannot wait to see where Blaize ends up. I think where Blaize does end up will probably tell us more as to what his thought process was.
Yeah, that's fair.
If he ends up at another bottom tier club and he plays starting fullback next year, I think you'll probably think, okay, he got a pretty decent offer, pretty decent contract. If he ends up at like Sydney Roosters or the Panthers, he's probably taking unders to go, you know what, I want to win premierships. I want to be the best I can be. We've got some audio here on Kevy Walters on the loss to the Bulldogs.
Oh, I'm disappointed, yeah. I just thought we were a bit flat from the start. Maybe Origin, has had a bit of effect on a few of our boys. We just didn't seem to find our mojo early, and they did. They've been doing it all year, so, yeah, they were clearly the better side today.
There you go, Kevy Walters. Look, I think with the Broncos, like you can look at all of the reasons of like Origin, and I know we've got some audio here of Gordy Tallis calling for Paddy Carrigan, basically to be given the captaincy, and he also said some other things as well on NL360, basically listing all the excuses that they could have this year as to why they're not going well. We'll get the audio of Gordy Tallis here.
I think the team's lacking leadership. So I watch them closely. I go there, I sit there with my family, and when the chips were down, on Saturday, someone needed to stand and put a stake in the ground and say,
what about Reynolds? He's a leader.
Well, he didn't do it. And in the grand final, he failed to get him home as well. And that's what they paid him to do. So if he's the captain, like there's something where, and he's not doing it, there might be a chance where you put Carrigan there.
There you have it. Gordo has had his opinion on it. Look, I think with the Broncos, you can try to look to captaincies, and we had these injuries and then grand final hangovers, and like, to me, I don't care. It's irrelevant to me. That roster should be in the top 8. That
100%
roster
should be.
And so it's all, in my personal opinion, that's all white noise. Like, that is totally, there are so many other clubs right now that are currently in the top 8 that have had just as many injuries and nowhere near the roster the Broncos have that are currently in the top 8. So I think it's all white noise. I think that in regards to the captaincy, you don't need to see but on your arm to make a big play and get the boys buoyed.
That's huge from Gordy.
Yeah,
pretty much calling out Adam Reynolds, isn't it?
I don't understand it, to be honest, because the argument, okay, well, how come Adam Reynolds didn't do something big in the game? Well, how come Paddy didn't do something big? Like, you don't need to have the captain next to your name to do something big in the game. So, look, to be honest, it's just the reality is this: since Kevy taken over, we went 14th, 9th, 2nd, and we're probably going to finish 12th to 13th or something like that this year. And I think that a lot of Broncos fans, if you go 14th, because of the absolute disaster that Kevy took over, which it was a disaster.
Yes.
14th, 9th to 2nd to in the top 8, I think everyone would sit there and go, you know what? Yep, we've rebuilt we're a top 8. We stay around the top 8 right now, and let's build into another grand final appearance. The concern is the reality is, in the 4 years, it's one final series. Now, granted, they may do something incredible, and we would all love that. But even then, if they get into finals and they lose in the first week and get bounced out, that's just painting over cracks. Like, that doesn't fix the problem with what's going on right now. So, unfortunately, I think at the Broncos, you can try and point fingers at all these different reasons, but at the end of the day, even if finals are made this year and we get knocked out in week 1, unfortunately, all high positions, whether all the way through the coaching staff to the top, there need to be some hard, honest conversations. And I think that heading into next year, there should be pressure on key positions in the club. Unfortunately, that's just the reality of the situation the club finds itself in.
Do you think that's, everyone understands that there's relationship, there's bias attached to a lot of things that people do on media. And do you think it's more of a deflection to deflect away from the coach, puts a bit of a spotlight on the captaincy? But you're right, Kempy, you only got to look at the example of the Parramatta Eels. They're the prime example. 2022, they had some success under Brad Arthur. They'd, had dipped a couple of times, but they
had way more success than the Broncos have had.
Way more. Yeah, Brad Arthur was really consistently, I think he might have had, one bad season in between, getting them from the wooden spoon for a couple of years that they were there. But in 2022, it goes to the grand final. They got humbled by the Penrith Panthers. The next year, they have a down year. Halfway through the following year, Brad Arthur is gone. And that's just the nature of this business. No one cares about what's happened in the past. If anything, you have higher expectations when you go to a grand final, and it gets highlighted even more so.
And also,
people talk about it more than the team that, like the Warriors, for instance.
Yeah, they
were in the preliminary final. No one is getting on the Warriors as much because they were in the last game. They were 3 or 4 minutes away from a grand final, and they fell off in dramatic fashion. So everyone's talking about hangover. I've seen, Adam Reynolds was interviewed himself about it. So with making the grand final, I think it puts more pressure on you than, a Sharks situation or a Warriors of last year where people don't have as high expectations because the squad is too good. And you're right, this time or even earlier the next year, if going into the origin period, they haven't got this fixed, it's not only the captaincy, it'll also be the coach that's being questioned as well.
Everyone, absolutely. Like the thing is if they had got to the grand final with a roster that was punching above its weight, and then this, and we were rebuilding from a genuine and I hate to say normal club, I say it in air quotes, because the Broncos are blessed with talent. Like, talent has never been a Brisbane issue because they're a one-team town. Obviously, Redcliffe are, well, the Dolphins are in now. But you look at that roster, they should be belting teams. Like, a roster with the amount of guns, like a roster with Selwyn Cobbo, Katoni Staggs, Reece Walsh, Haas, Carrigan, Reynolds, Ezra Mann. Like, we are talking like the cream of the crop kind of stuff. So, yeah, as I said, you can look to all these reasons, and you can look to all of these injuries and all these ways as to why things haven't gone good enough. If that was in a vacuum and we were the only club that had experienced those things, then they would be real excuses. But unfortunately, it's just not the case.
The origin excuse doesn't cut it.
Doesn't cut it. The injury excuse doesn't cut it. And we need to fix things all the way up to the top. We need to fix things. And I think that the biggest issue with the Broncos at the moment is that because they are such a huge fan base, the sting of where they're at right now doesn't sting as hard as if you're with the West Tigers. Because if you're a Broncos player right now, you're still running out to training sessions packed full of fans. You're still walking around the town, loved by everyone, because the Broncos are by far the biggest club when it comes to fan bases. They're the richest club, all that kind of stuff. So the sting of not going well doesn't sting as hard as the bottom tier sides who barely get anyone to show up for their games, and the resources aren't as flowing as other Brisbane Broncos. So, yeah, I think that unfortunately all the yarn around the injuries and everything and Origin and blah 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 and grand final hangovers, it's just excuses. It's just excuses.
I think people if you're not aware of the Broncos system too, or you haven't been up and around that, because I didn't know about this, right? Yeah. So I went up and did some content, filmed some content with the Broncos boys. I caught them at the back end of the training session. It's crazy, their facilities and the way it's set up, and the fans that were there for just a midweek training session, and being able to view some of the training they will do and the number of people they got there for a training. So I was blown away.
Yeah,
I'd never seen anything like that in my NRL career, and then post NRL career.
Well, that's the thing. Like when I say this on my podcast, a lot of people roll their eyes and go, "You're so biased. Broncos love." Like obviously, I love the Broncos. I'll back them to the day I die. I am biased to the Broncos, but when I try to say they get to a normal training session. So right now, they're not even in top 8. They would get to a normal training captain's run what some people get before a prelim semi-final, what some clubs do. They get to that to normal sessions. And until you go up and experience how loved they are by the local pop, you just can't explain it until you experience it. And so that's where I do feel like sometimes that can negatively affect the boys, because you're a young man, you're still getting loved and adulated and all that kind of stuff. And I think that maybe they're not really realising the situation the club is currently in. We haven't won a grand final since 2006, and we are the biggest club in the competition for the last X amount of years. I do think heading into next year there will be pressure on all positions. It sucks to say, as someone that loves the Broncos, and this comes from a place of I want everyone. I would love nothing more than the boys this week to turn up, absolutely belt everyone they play, and go on to do something incredible. I'll be riding them all the way home, and even if they don't, I'll still be with them till the death. But I do think some tough conversations need to be had. We've got some audio here of Greg Alexander says the Panthers will not release To'o.
The story seemed to grow legs through the day, and I saw the Channel 9 because I was watching the Olympics. Now, the reported unhappiness or not happy with remuneration, which means money, is certainly news to the club. I'm part of the recruitment and retention committee. Brian To'o's name has not been raised in terms of, let's shop Brian To'o around. That has not happened, not a mention. Now, the club, Matt Cameron will obviously speak to Brian and his manager today, but he is contracted to the end of 27. There won't be any early release for Brian To'o, under no circumstances. As a club, we'd be disappointed if the NRL's anti-tampering rules were being abused.
There you go, Greg Alexander. He'd be the person to know what's going on. It's a very interesting situation because To'o, Danny Weiler's tweet on Monday sent rugby league social media into raptures. Panthers CEO came out, denied the report, along with obviously Greg Alexander. But Penrith will still meet with To'o's management on Wednesday morning to clear the air over the winger's future. So I guess it's one of those hard ones because you can listen to the audio from Greg Alexander and you can read between the lines and you go, well, you said you releasing him hasn't come up in conversation. But so you can do all that. But at the end of the day, you've just got to... Greg Alexander has said the club is absolutely, not going to release him. They haven't heard of it. You have to believe that at face value. And you also have to believe, anything else that comes from an official at Penrith at face value. Because otherwise, you're just making things up and speculating. But I do think it is very telling now that they are meeting with the manager. That would suggest to me that maybe it has come from To'o or the management that he may be a bit not satisfied with the amount he's on. It's a very weird one because when it first came out, I was like, that is crazy talk. The best winger in the game, and in my opinion, at the very least, the top 3 wingers of all time, and arguably the greatest winger of all time in Brian To'o. That's how high I have him in my category of winger. There's no way they'd release him. But then when I heard the figure that he's on $675K in this new salary cap, that's when I was like, oh, okay. Now, there might be a sticking point where Brian To'o, can you please get his age? I think he's around 25, 26. So he's probably, he wants to probably be making the big bucks sooner rather than later. It's not like he's He's 25, so it's not like he's a 21, 22.
25?
Yeah, so
It feels like he's been around for 10 years.
I know, it's crazy. Look, isn't it? It's an interesting one because when a club is when a player is underperforming and on a big contract, the club is more than happy to say, mate, you go and find another club. Now, if it is true that the management is meeting Penrith, it seems that a player is saying, I am playing, at least $300,000 or $400,000 above what I'm currently being paid. Then all of a sudden, it's an issue. I do find that always interesting. It's usually the club that has the power in these situations. But what's your thoughts on the situation?
Yeah, I can understand Brandy if he's part of the recruitment and retention decisions that need to be made at Penrith. Not discussing Brian To'o if he's on 670, or if it's reported that he's on 650, 675,000, because they are well and truly getting him on unders.
Huge unders in the new salary cap.
It's exactly what I mentioned before with young Blaize Talagi.
Yeah.
Like when you come through, you see, let's go back to that very polarising moment. When we go back to the wedding speech of Jerome Loy. Got to remember, jokes aside, with the wedding speech with Jerome, who was obviously his best man. So Bizza would have, I believe he would have signed even before Stephen Crichton had moved on. Is that correct?
Yeah, pretty sure, yeah.
So, not only was Jerome his best man, but Spencer Leniu and Stephen Crichton were his groomsmen as well. So that was 3 years ago now, two and a half years ago. During that period that he's re-signed for unders to stay with his mates, they actually haven't been able to afford his mates. And now his mates are moving on. So, I can't see a world in which a guy like, Danny Wadler throws this around willy-nilly. He must have got some sort of report that there's some unease. It's probably come from To'o's camp, right? And that makes sense because if I'm looking at To'o on those figures, it feels like he's been around for 10 plus years because he's been, just like you say, the best winger now for, 4 or 5 years. He's been such a great servant for their club. You got to take into an account the likability of a guy like Brian To'o as well. For, all the things that were thought about or said about Jerome Loy, he's been quite an enigma out there. He's been one of those, love him or hate him sort of players. With Brian To'o, I think he is just beloved league-wide, not only by players, because he's got the respect of all the players, because he plays the right way, and he doesn't carry on like a goose in any way. And then it'd be very hard to find a fan that dislikes Brian To'o.
I've never seen a fan write a negative comment about Brian To'o.
Yeah, and that just doesn't happen.
That's insane.
Considering they've won 3 competitions in a row. We love to hate. Like, that's the tall poppy syndrome that we talk about here in Australia, and we like our athletes to be humble, and we don't like them when they get too big. And if they do, we bring them down. No one does that with Brian To'o because he's always carried himself the right way. And
in regards to value, in my opinion, he's worth $1 million in this new salary cap.
I agree.
He's worth $1 million. And people go, that's insane. Again, guys, I have to reiterate, the salary cap has gone up by 25%. So that would be like Brian To'o being paid $750,000 in the old salary cap. Brian To'o right now in this era is the only winger worth $1 million.
I agree.
Because the stats that he puts up every single week are better than every single front rower in the game, essentially. When it comes to meters, if it's not, it's very close to the best. Then you've also got his incredible try-scoring ability. You've got his incredible defensive ability. You've got the fact that he's been in New South Wales' top 3 best players in Origin for at least 3 years now. I think he's worth $1 million. Now, I'm always of the mind, though, that if you do sign a contract, I would rather you see it out than break the contract. But I also do see the argument of if Panthers are smart. They're clearly smart. They've won 3 premierships.
Yep.
But I do think that if he goes to them and says, guys, I want an upgrade, I think they should give it to him.
I think they should too. This is a really unique case where
Very unique.
For the most part, I agree with you. I would love to see players. More often than not, I lean towards players playing out their contract. Unless you're on dramatic overs, just like when players are on dramatic overs, or it's perceived they're on dramatic overs, that clubs go, no, this isn't working for us.
Yeah.
Can we find another club for you?
Yep.
can they play a portion of the contract? Brian To'o, if that is indeed correct, the figure that you've said, 650, 675 mark, it's way too low. And in my opinion, the reason he would have taken that low of a contract even to begin with, because he has always been this dude now for the last 2 or 3 years. He was this guy before. Granted, he's gone on and won probably 2 extra premierships, and then, all the stuff that you talk about with regards to New South Wales, and then obviously playing for Samoa as well. He's on 2 far unders now, and I think there's a respect factor in here from the Panthers where, they come to an agreement. I think this gets sorted out. I think this is just a bit of, we're looking around. Maybe Brian's looked at some of the contracts from some of the other outside backs or wingers that they've gotten in the last 6 months in particular, where it just feels like you talk about the spike in those contracts due to the increase in the salary cap. I can understand Brian To'o going, nah, this is too big of a gap. Like, I'm on this. I took a club-friendly contract because I love the club and they gave me a start and we've been successful, but this is too low.
Another part of it, and you alluded to it earlier and we spoke about it before the show, is that he would have signed that contract as well under the impression that he was going to be playing with Critter, Luai, Spencer Lenu, and all those boys. Now they're all gone, and whether you believe certain reports or not, Luai and Critter, there are whispers that breakup wasn't necessarily handled the best from a player's perspective. Depends who you talk to.
Yep.
But there's certain people that say Critter and Luai were very hard done by. And so when your best mates are hard done by like that, in a locker room, it doesn't necessarily get around the whole locker room, but if it's your closest mates,
if they're your groomsmen.
Exactly. You do know about it. Yeah. You do know what happened. It does hurt. Is there a world, do you think, where it's not even about the money? It's about, you know what? All my mates are gone. I might be considering going as well.
Yeah, look, I don't know Brian well enough to sort of speculate on that. I will say, just from an outsider looking in, he doesn't strike me as the sort of guy to throw his toys out of the cot over something like, it's a business decision, right? And although it probably could have been handled a little bit better, it has been very tricky balancing not only the relationships with those guys, Matty Burton, Viliami Kikau, Api Coruscant. They've had to let big names go. And that's just, a lot of players out in Penrith would have understood that.
I think
it's more, if I'm in the Brian To'o camp, I'm looking at him going, mate, there are wingers on close to $1 million right now, and you are better than not only some of the wingers on that money. You're more valuable than some of the fullbacks on that money.
Yeah. I don't necessarily think it might be the concern with To'o in regards to big players being moved on. That's business. That's business usual. I think maybe in the Critter and Luai situation, it would have been the narratives that were being put out about Luai and about Critter.
Yeah, okay.
For example, the whole yarn about Critter only wanted to play fullback, and that's why he was leaving the club. When in reality, now that time has passed, no one even talks about that anymore.
No,
clearly it wasn't true. Like that was the whole yarn.
Yeah.
Like he was getting painted in a picture that he wanted a big contract, and then he wanted to play fullback. Both of those weren't true. He was willing to take essentially as little as possible at the Panthers, and also he didn't want to play fullback. Then you had the whole Luai situation. Remember when he rocked up to training and he went home for a few days?
Yeah.
Around the Tiger situation where it got leaked out that he had agreed to certain things. So I guess that's where you could go. Maybe he wasn't happy with that. But I do agree with you. I think that once the initial hurt of that, calms down, you just go, you know what, it's a business. I do think it's probably more along the lines of, I've got another 2025, 6, and 7 on this contract.
Yeah.
When in reality, so I'm essentially missing out on minimum $1 million cash of value in 3 years.
And also throw in, you've got to consider the way he plays footy. That's the biggest concern that we've had with the long-term contracts with Jason Tomololo.
Yeah, the physicality.
And Fasul Malawi.
Yeah.
He doesn't play like, now wingers are trying to mimic him because he's been so successful. But what he puts through his body through and his availability as well, he's always available. Like he's always playing games. Ivan's done a good job of resting his Origin players, but you throw all of that in, like he can, I'd imagine he can only keep up this sort of level of play for the next 2 or 3 years. Father Time's undefeated. I've seen players that have been absolute animals, and then that one year, that one preseason, they get there and they just go, "This is just becoming too tough."
Too tough.
And it's understandable, right?
Yeah.
So he's looking at it now, and during the next couple of years, if he's looking at other wingers' salaries and he's thinking that he's leaving close to minimum of 500,000 on the table going north all the way up to $1 million, then he needs to be compensated for that. And I do believe this is one of those really unique cases where I think Penrith look at that and go, okay,
100%
let's not frustrate a guy like Brian who's super popular, been super successful, plus the amount of effort and the load that he puts forward for this club. I think they find a sweet spot. I think he gets upgraded, and I'd imagine it'd get done pretty quick.
I was about to say, he's getting upgraded and it's happening quick.
Yeah.
Because you cannot replace Toto. There's not a single person in this competition that does what Toto does. I think Penrith Panthers, they are such a smart operation. They are so good at what they do, and they're ruthless when they need to be, but also they're smart. I think that, sometimes you can confuse ruthlessness with ego. But I don't think the Panthers are going to have an ego in this situation. I think they're going to realise, this guy is important to winning competitions for us. I think they upgrade him. I think it'll be done. Honestly, I'd be surprised if it's not done within the next 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah, I agree.
I'd be very surprised because, as you said, the last thing you want heading into finals footy is the most loved man in rugby league pissed off.
Yeah.
That's the last thing you do. So I think they sort it out. And I do think it is quite a unique situation. We're not talking about a rookie that's had 2 or 3 good years and he's all of a sudden getting bigger than his boots and he's demanding too much money. We're talking about a winger that hasn't had a bad year in 5 years. And so, he's earned the right to go, hang on a sec, the salary cap's gone up, we've lost all these players, all these other guys are on minimum $800,000. I believe I should, when the clubs often ask players to go the extra mile for the club.
Yep.
Sometimes a club needs to go the extra mile for a player, and this is one of those special situations that they need.
This is a rare occasion where I think it does get done. It's
Yep.
very unique. It doesn't happen often. I don't
Yep.
think there would be any Penrith fans that would be opposed to Penrith Panthers going, look, we signed Brian at this deal because, due to respect and the circumstances, we're going to up him. There's not one Penrith fan that will be going, no, don't give him an extra 200, 300,000 a season.
Mate.
Give it to him straight away and make sure he's happy. We've got 4 premierships to win.
Yeah, I think it gets done and dusted. So don't worry, Panthers fan. I'll be very surprised. And I'll tell you what, if there's some crazy world where he does leave, it's clearly not about the money, because I just don't think that the Penrith Panthers would allow him to.
I agree with that.
Welcome back to the Captain's Run. All right, some other transfer news. Valentine Holmes. The Cowboys call him in. They say, mate, that last year of your contract, if you can find somewhere else, you should take it. Basically, I guess the way it was all set up was the manager was saying, are you going to extend Valentine Holmes for the November 1 deadline? They said, look, if you can find somewhere else, take it. He has done exactly that with the Dragons reportedly in the front seat, or the box seat, to get his signature. Where do you reckon Val ends up?
I think we've talked about a number of players now, and a lot of it comes back down to rumours, but I'm looking at a club as big as the Sydney Roosters, and there's too many players moving on from that situation or that team that have taken up a significant amount of the salary cap, and that's Jared Warrior-Hargraves is going over to the Super League next year with his mate Luke Keary, and then you've got the 2 centres, Joseph Manu and Joseph Swaliti, that have also moved on. I can't imagine that there's not a club as big as the Sydney Roosters that would, like Valentine Holmes, to me, feels like a very Sydney Roosters type signing. He seems like the sort of guy. I can understand the Dragons having interest, and I can understand them probably being favourites because of the relationship with Shane Flanagan. That makes a lot of sense.
And the coin he'll get at the Dragons.
And the coin and the position he'll play. Like there's a world in which he goes down and goes straight into the fullback position, which would have been his ideal position before he was. You got to remember, he started on the wing, and then he started playing some fullback, and then he went over and did he did a stint in the NFL. But they had to move a few things around before they finally settled on. It was actually Hamiso Tabuai-Fidow and Scott Drinkwater that they were fighting for the fullback spot, and they said, Val, go play centres for us while we figure this out.
Yep.
So that's probably more appealing to him. If he wants to get good money and play fullback, then Dragons would be the spot. But I can't imagine the Sydney Roosters just sitting back and going, we're missing out on all these star players. We've got an unproven rugby union convert that we're going to bring over and potentially put in the centres. They re-signed Daniel Tupou, which is a good re-signing for them and much needed with all the veteran presence that have moved on. But I don't know. Val Holmes, to me, just seems like a Rooster. I wouldn't be surprised. And then also throw in the Chad Townsend factor. Really good friends. Got, business away from footy together. That's another factor that gets me thinking that sort of links. Whether you think Chad Townsend is going to be a really big part of the Sydney Roosters moving forward, just that familiarity with Chad, that could play a part for sure.
Yeah, I think with the Roosters, I know Joey Marnie's leaving. I'll be shocked if he's not back by mid-year next year. I think.
Oh wow!
I think he has that one season with Japan, and he comes back.
Okay.
I'd be very, very surprised if he's not. I think that because he's only signed a 1-year deal, I'm pretty sure, with that Japanese. It's Japanese rugby team that he ended up going to, correct? Yeah. And so I reckon he's gone away, get your coin, come back mid-year. I don't know at all. And also Kiri re-signs and then he announced his retirement. I don't know. It all just kind of, I think Manu might be back before mid-year. So really, I think the Suaalii replacement, I guess the question from the Roosters is do you go for, the old experienced Val?
Yep. Or
do you make a play at a guy like Blaize Talagi that's clearly on the market? I personally reckon Val ends up at the Dragons.
Okay.
I think that he did miss a couple years earning potential when he went over to the NFL, at least a year or so. And so I think that the money that he could earn in the Dragons will be exponentially because if he goes to the Roosters, what do you reckon? They probably get him for 500, 600? Maybe 600 probably the minimum you could pay him?
No, I would expect, if I'm Val, I'm not going for anything less than I'm going to be on at the Cowboys. So either the Cowboys are chipping in, and I can't see the Cowboys doing that, or I'd expect Val to go there.
Well,
maybe
the Cowboys will have to chip in the first year, I reckon.
Okay.
Because as a club, you'd say, no, I'm not taking him for that first year unless you chip in some.
I was having this discussion with someone yesterday about that. It's another unique situation where it's purely not to do with talent and what he produces on the field. It's a salary cap issue. So I think there's a world in which the Cowboys, are not stoked about letting Val Holmes go.
Really?
They've just,
really?
It could be.
See, I reckon it's some money compared to his form. His form hasn't been great this year.
But
and they've got
factoring in the youngsters that are coming through, right? So it's not like there are some other players around that there are probably better examples that I think of a little bit later on. But with Val, I think there's a good world in which he goes for a large portion of his contract to a team. And you're right. If it was a team like the Sydney Roosters, I'm probably thinking a 2-year deal for Val on very similar to money. But if it's the Dragons, then I think the Dragons will pay him a little bit more and then probably throw in an extra year, which, again, that'll be very hard for him to turn down.
At his age, too, because he's 30 years old now, pretty sure. So he's a bit older. Oh, man. It's the Roosters. Don't they just time things perfectly? The fact that there's all these guys on the market now. I mean, a few months ago they weren't, and they need outside backs, and now there's outside backs on the market. Okay, some other guys. We've got some whispers that Hastings is reportedly signed with the Lead Rhinos Super League after being, this is from Andrew Voss, reportedly signed with the Lead Rhinos. Obviously, he's not playing this week. It's Phoenix Crossland. What do you reckon there?
Yeah, it's been a tough old season for the Knights, hasn't it? And, they just haven't been able to figure out this spine all year. A big fella that I do the podcast with, Willie Mason, always says iron sharpens iron. In some cases, I don't think that's the case. I think for forward packs and outside backs, that's the case.
Yeah.
For my spine players, I don't want any iron sharpening iron. I want to know who my guys are.
Yeah.
And they haven't had that clarity all year.
Yeah.
And that's been a problem. So you bring in a guy like Jack Hogger who come off the grand final, and everyone's like, Jack Hogger, local junior, coming home. You just won a grand final for Penrith Panthers. It added all this unnecessary head noise around what the spine had just come off. They went on a really deep run at the back end of last year. And also throw in the uncertainty around the hooker position, which hasn't really been mentioned too much. But when you got your club captain in Brayley, who's missed a lot of time and unfortunately been struck down with another number of injuries in back-to-back years, and then you get the development and Phoenix Crossland going on this run last year and sort of making the position himself. There's just been uncertainty around their spine all year, and it felt like they kind of figured it out. And going back to Jackson Hastings, mate, he'll be sweet over there. He'll go back over to the Super League. It suits his game to a T. Wet weather conditions, kick the corners, game manage, the confidence that he had playing over there. He's a completely he won't have all of the issues that he faces here in the NRL with the perceived dramas that's associated with him, and plus, he'll go to the Leeds team and be the guy.
Yeah.
Whereas with the Newcastle Knights, it's Caelan's team.
Yeah.
It's not his team. So he's got his whole job at Newcastle Knights is putting Caelan in the best position for them to get him over the line. I think it serves him better to just be at a team where he doesn't need that extra pressure. He'll just go over there. He'll control the team at Leeds. They'll have a game plan that's planned specifically around him, and he'll go so much better over there.
Look, the Knights' recruitment over the last few years, it's been so bizarre. I cannot understand it. They got Gamble, Hastings doing really well. Then mid-year they signed Cogger. They had Lockie Miller that they brought from the Sharks. They traded one of their good young front rowers, New South Wales rep, to the Sharkies to get Lockie Miller. Then they moved Lockie Miller in. They wanted KP to play 6, but then he plays fullback. I do feel like their roster management over the last couple of years hasn't been great. And they've actually just brought in Peter O'Sullivan, I'm pretty sure, which will change quite a lot. And I think that, we're probably going to see a lot of movement around this roster in the next few months at the Knights with O'Sullivan coming there. The Hastings ones, it kind of makes sense not because of performance, but more just it never seems settled.
No.
The fact that they got all the way, they played as well as they did last year, and we were still questioning whether he would be the starting 7. That's crazy.
It was crazy. Going into the season, I was hearing reports that Jack Cogger was going to beat him out for that spot.
And so,
like I said, with that added pressure, external pressure, and then obviously it's internal. When you go on the run that they went on last year and were playing so well up until they failed with the injury to himself, and then obviously Caelan had that injury against the Warriors.
Yeah.
And they bowed out dramatically in dramatic fashion in the semi-final. It would have been nice to go into this preseason with that spine and go, we're the guys. The Jack Cogger one was super weird because they signed him halfway through the season and they'd already signed Will Price at the start of the season. Yeah. So I can understand the Will Price one. I could understand at the start of the year because it's all right, if you've watched some tape of Will over there, he's shown a bit of potential. We're probably going to get him on unders from the UK, and then we can develop him behind the spine that they had that had been successful. It seemed like...
And also, he's so different to Gamble as well. Yeah.
So, that made a lot of sense. The Cogger one didn't make sense.
Because he's basically Hastings. They're two so similar. Very strange. Now, the Nelson Asofa-Solomona, very weird one because you haven't really heard many quotes from Nelson. The Storm are such a well-oiled operation. You hadn't heard much from them. A few weeks ago, everything that I was getting told was he was gone. Gone. Not actually. Matter of fact, I'll go further. I reckon as far back as 3 months ago, I was getting told it's just not working out.
When he was playing New South Wales Cup and when he first got back?
Even before that.
Okay.
Even before that. But then, basically, I think, and this is a text, so that News Corp is reporting that Nelson said he was taking the media for a ride and you guys jumped it. So basically, the post that he put up on Instagram basically implying that he was leaving. So now it's looking like Nelson's staying. And I wonder, the question then becomes then the Storm probably can't afford Stefano if they've got Nelson. Because the argument behind the scenes is the Storm were trying to get a contract registered, but they couldn't unless they knew what was happening with Nelson because of salary cap. And so if Nelson's staying, then maybe that counts out Stefano, which puts the Bulldogs in the box seat. I'm still curious about this Nelson situation though, because he's been nowhere near as impactful as he has been. The minutes that he's been playing hasn't been as much this year, and I'd have to check that, but that's just from the eye test. I'd have to fact check it.
I seen one game where he played 18 minutes,
and it's just I know he's come out and said, "Oh, I put that out there. The media jumped it up." I get that. But like when you actually look at the reality is he's playing less minutes. Why is that? I want to know why that is. When he was there, when you look at their forward pack before this season, he's their main guy.
Yeah. And in this day and age, when you look at some, like the reason we throw out the names like Stefano and this sort of money that they're attracting, it's because of, you've got to have a big body.
And they're hard to find.
They're very hard to find.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are on good money. And it wasn't great signs when there has to be more to it. There has to be more to it because he's playing New South Wales Cup and it wasn't just a week and it took a couple of weeks. And when Craig Bellamy was asked about it, he was non-committal.
Yeah.
Like he didn't want to ever declare that Nelson was going to be back at a certain point.
Well,
he looks a little bit heavier for sure. I know he's a big bopper, but he's in my opinion, he looks like he's about 5 kilos over his prime weight, which is at that weight being the biggest human in the NRL.
He's so big.
Like I don't mind sometimes when your smaller guys come back and they put on, or a half puts on, 5 kilos, or even a prop that's about 100. Like if Max King come in next year at 110 kilos, I'd go, that's actually really good for Max King.
Yeah, thank you. Well done.
he could use a little bit extra.
Yeah.
But when you're the biggest player in the NRL, then an extra 5 kilos, it's
huge.
It's huge.
So, look, the good thing for Storm fans is it looks like he's staying. And the good thing for Storm fans is you're on top of the table, killing it again. Welcome back to the Captain's Run. Let's get straight into some text here. Stop Big Nas rumours. It's all crap. Pezzett from Storm to Knights. Hillstorm Hillary. Beak, Joey Manu, who has already stated implicitly that he is not returning to the Chooks in late 25 or 26 and is playing the 2 full seasons in rugby. Okay, well, we'll see. And, I tell you what, get that coin. Get that rugby coin. Let's talk about some expansion. So basically, V'landys has stated that they want to get to 20 teams. I do really like the aggressive nature in which we're expanding. I guess the question is it too much too soon? Is it too clicky? What are your thoughts on expansion?
Yeah, look, it's really important. I think the one positive to come out of, or at least one positive that I can think of straight away that's been with the Dolphins is the recruitment or the selecting of Wayne Bennett as the first coach, and that's going to be really hard to replicate. There are not a number of Wayne Bennetts that make a lot of sense because when you do start a team from scratch, you look at some of the teams that are struggling. When I looked at that Dolphins roster when it was first put together and then they had the documentary, I was like, very underwhelmed. I thought they were going to struggle a lot more than what they did. They fell off the cliff last year, and look, they've hit a bit of a rough patch this year. But that's my concern with introducing a couple of more teams. I'm just not necessarily about the playing roster, about the quality of coaches that are available to coach these teams. So that's my main worry. But in saying that, I like one of the main points here, which it would be reducing the workload on players. So it would be, it would be potentially 19 rounds. Is that what they're saying, that you only play each other once?
Yep.
I like that. And that's very smart from V'landys. So if you are looking to expand...
We have some quotes here. Quotes. So V'landys, the biggest benefit of going to 20 teams is the fairer draw. It's something we can't fix with 17 teams. It's a fact that some teams now have harder draws than others. I know the RLPA would welcome the 19-round format because it's less stress and wear and tear on the players. I agree. We have to reduce their workload. The game is more physical than it's ever been. I'm in awe of what the players can do in backing up from a game like Origin Decider. The draw would mean broadcasters get 190 games over the course of a season, 14 less than 104 games being played under the current format. Would they accept that cut and be willing to pay the same amount or more? In the event that they aren't, to extend the season by a week, the NRL could also look at wildcard series between teams placed 7th to 10th in the week leading up to the finals. I actually don't mind the wildcard system. And I know this is getting into a crazy talk, but I've said it for quite a while now. I think that we need to implement something sooner rather than later that incentivizes fans to stay engaged all the way down to the last couple games.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the answer is. You need to sit down and you need to break it all down. But like, for example, how many fans now watching, the bottom 4 sides or even the bottom 6 sides and go, we're done. Season's over. But imagine if you could go, this bottom 6 sides, somehow, some way, the points they get over the next 6 weeks contributes to a wild card entry into the finals.
So I've got quite a unique take on this because I actually love NBA and NFL, and it doesn't excite me, the wild card. It never has, and it's been in the NBA and NFL for a while. I don't get excited about the playing tournament.
Are you fans of one of the lower teams though that are usually playing for it? Because this would be for the fans of the lower tier teams.
No, well, I couldn't tell you. I haven't followed it. Actually, no, you're right. No, I follow the Miami Heat.
Yep.
They were a playing team, went to a really deep run and made all the way to the Eastern Conference.
From the wild card?
From the wild card.
And did you enjoy it?
I enjoyed that run, yes. I didn't enjoy the first weeks, and I still haven't enjoed the wild card weekend.
Okay.
Just as a neutral watching
As a neutral watching.
It. It was pretty cool to see the Heat go on that run. But, I don't know. Once it gets to finals time, I think I can understand people being more excited about it leading into the playoffs. When it actually gets to playoffs, and I want to see some genuine, good finals footy in rugby league terms compared to playoff basketball or playoff NFL, then I'm less excited about those.
So what I think that you'd have to create a system where you're not playing wild, like basically you're playing to get the wild card draw, and then the one team, they just get into finals footy, if you know what I'm saying. Okay. So it's not like you've got lower tier teams playing each other in finals footy.
Okay, so would you go then, if it becomes just say a wild card 9th team, the first position 1 gets the week off, and then 2 plays 5, like the same system?
Something along those lines,
okay.
Yeah. And so basically you've just got a team that wouldn't have made it normally, won the wild card draw, a wild card entry into the final 5 weeks of the season, or 4 weeks or whatever, and they get a crack at, whichever 8th position or 7th position or whatever it is, and then you can follow them and basically have a chance. You stay engaged with the game.
What about the poor old Tigers that is engaged for an extra week just because they've got to hang on and mathematically be ruled out a week later?
Oh, mate.
No, I understand it, mate. And look, it's very popular in American sports, and there are definitely people that have been petitioning it for it here. I'm a little bit more hesitant. If it was to extend to 20 teams, then I'd be more open to it for sure. Extending a top 8 because it makes more sense, more teams. Therefore, there could be a world in which a team
10.
is Well, no, if it stays a top 8, the bottom 4 teams could be eliminated. You'd imagine a couple of weeks earlier.
Yeah, which is even longer.
That would be a longer period.
Yep.
So I am for it if they do extend. With the current system, I think it's okay.
Welcome back to the Captain's Run. All righty, let's get into it. So, as I said, guys, it's a Telegraph. Bulldog is reporting that the Penrith Panthers and Talagi have agreed to deal. So, again, not confirmed, but sometimes when these things are reported, we already have found out that he is moving on, so he wouldn't have moved on. He wouldn't have informed the Eels that he's moving on if a deal wasn't already there.
Yeah, it makes sense, right? Yeah, it makes sense. And for the most part, you always got to be careful with this, right? But 95% of the time, when things like this happen, they're generally pretty accurate. But also be careful. Be careful as fans not to buy into it or is indeed confirmed.
Look, in regards to the decision of going to... Look, I think it's interesting because we spoke about wherever he ends up, it'll give us a good indication of where his head's at. And so from an Eels friend, although it would be really disappointing that you lost a guy like Blaize Talagi, at the very least, it was a juggernaut club that stole him, if you know what I'm saying. If he had gone to a club that was struggling for big money, you could have been like, if you just had stuck around, look at our roster, we could have had success and you can earn your money in the long term. But when it's a club like Penrith Panthers, at least you can go, well, you know what? He wants to win premierships. He's a good young talent. I kind of understand it. I know that's not easy for a fan to stomach, but for example, let's say Payne Haas went to the Penrith Panthers.
Yep.
I'd be devastated as a Broncos fan for sure because it's Payne Haas. But I'd also be, I get it, man. You deserve to win a premiership. And look, he's nowhere near Payne Haas' standard. I'm just using Payne as an example.
But that's why you've probably used Stefano early on. That's why we're reporting Stefano in a way, right?
Yeah.
Understanding the players now, it's crazy in this. I think you got to factor in the amount of money that's in the game these days. I think players, say 5-10 years ago, definitely were forced into staying at teams for a larger or teams that were struggling a little bit more just because of the amount of money that they're on.
Yeah.
You can live quite comfortably now off some of the money that these players are getting in the mid-range.
Well, he's the minimum these days is like 170 grand or something.
Yeah.
That's the minimum.
That's the minimum.
Which is a lot of money.
But for the most part, players that are up for, or teams that are least interested in, their floor is 500 basically.
Yeah.
If two or three teams are interested in you, right? Whether whatever position that may be. So with that comes flexibility, and like I said, a couple of these younger players are deciding to take a little bit less at the start of their contracts, become winners, go to successful clubs like the Penrith Panthers.
So left field here.
Yeah.
Has he been signed? If he has been signed, has it been signed as a 6? He made his debut at 6 for the Eels. He has played some 6 coming through. Him in the Penrith system with Cleary as your 7, with that forward pack.
Well, I think it's pretty safe to say he hasn't signed as a fullback.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think we can agree upon that. Like when all the perceived.
Well, clearly that yarn wasn't true.
Well, that yarn about him being unsettled because he wants to play fullback. Well, that can't be the case now because he's not going to play fullback with Dylan Edwards.
And he's not going to play 6 at the Eels because of Dylan Brown.
Correct. So, this could be a decision. And I applaud him if it is if you're in a position of power like he is, off contract, he's not tied into anyone. He had a mutual option. He had a player option, sorry. He has enforced that. And he is now going to a team. And if he does go to a team, mate, if I'm an outside back or a player of potential that has the opportunity to play with Nathan Cleary steering me around with Isaiah Yeo, with the help of Isaiah Yeo, and have Dylan Edwards at the back, with Brian To'o taking my yardage carries, sign me up right now.
Moses Leota.
Moses Leota up front.
Come on now.
Liam Martin, maybe put a short ball to Liam Martin.
Oh, stop it.
If you can talk into Nath moving off that edge.
Yeah. Hot boy Sorensen as well.
You got Sorensen on the left. It's so appealing, mate.
It's very appealing.
Very understandable.
And so, like if you're getting offers from the Penny Panthers, a few $100,000 a year, he's probably going to get $400,000 a year, maybe $350,000, $400,000. Mate, absolutely. I don't think there's many young players that wouldn't have taken that, if it is true.
Yeah.
Okay. We are here for Chemist Warehouse. Get discounted prescriptions and save money at Chemist Warehouse. Time for the weekend preview. This weekend is the Harvey Norman Women in League round, celebrating the next generation of women by celebrating those who stepped up and blazed the path for them, whether on the field, in the community, or in the boardroom, plus raising awareness and much-needed funds for ovarian cancer. Harvey Norman has initiated a $1,000 goal kick donation per goal in the Sharks vs Rabbitohs game. You can donate to ovariancancer.net.au. So OVARIAN cancer.net.au/donations. West Tigers versus the Cowboys Thursday 7:50. Tigers Olam returns from a knee injury. Clemmer returns from an ankle injury, replacing Fanua Bole. Adam Dewey isn't named to return after being rested last week. So that's an interesting one. Even when we found the news that he was being rested last week, I commented on that going, that's a bit strange. He hasn't barely played any footy. Cowboys team news. Sam McIntyre replaces Jason Tamalolo, who's out with a fractured cheekbone. Harrison Edwards replaces Cotter, who is out with concussion. Lukey returns from hamstring injury, pushing Fini Fuyaki to the bench. What do you reckon about this one's? Horo?
Yeah, it's look, obviously the Cowboys are playing a lot better. They've got a lot more to play for. Do you factor in desperation? Do you factor in the Tigers having some fight? The big news off the back of Stefano. Missing two really big players, though. Ruben Cotter and Jason Tamalolo are going to be huge outs for the Cowboys. Jason Tamalolo has hit form in the last 4 to 5 weeks. He's playing really good footy. Ruben Cotter is the heartbeat of that forward pack now through the middle, so they'll be sorely missed. But I still think they've got enough ammunition, and I'll be staying on the Cowboys for this one.
Look, this will be famous last words, but I think the Cowboys are hitting form. I think that when I say hitting form, I'm not saying hitting form compared to your Storm and your Penrith Panthers. I'm saying hitting form for them. I think that they've been great the last couple of weeks. They've had some really important win against some really tough sides. I mean, you even look at the Bulldogs. That win, because it was against the Bulldogs, I think a lot of people, they beat the Bulldogs, kind of whatever. But the Bulldogs went and absolutely towed up the Broncos the week before, so that was a big win. I think they're starting to find their groove, the Cowboys. I really do. I think that They always had the attack. It was just their defence they needed to sort. So I think they win, and they win quite big.
Their physicality's gone up. The Cowboys' physicality has gone up. I think it was evident with Jeremiah Nanai on the weekend. He was going after people. Everyone associates Jeremiah Nanai with try scoring, attacking. I think defensively he's made and even across the board, the Cowboys team have made it a real emphasis to go after the game defensively, and it's going to serve them well on this little run into the finals. And I think they're going to be that dark horse. They're going to be a very tricky team come finals time, and I think they're going to be fighting for a top 4 position with potentially the Bulldogs in the very last round. I'm predicting a Sharks slide.
Yeah, I think the Sharks will slide.
And I think it'll be between the Bulldogs and the Cowboys for that final 4th position, top 4 position in the very last round they play each other.
Could you imagine? Especially with how close their last game was. The Cowboys for me. The crazy thing about Nanai is how young he is still. He's 21. It's actually mental. And with the Cowboys, if they've got a roll on or they're winning field position, Scotty Drinkwater is as good as any fullback in the business when it comes to creating points with his ball playing. Like, he is so slick. Now, onto the Warriors versus the Eels, Friday, 6 p.m, Go Media Stadium. The Warriors announced this week they've become the first side in NRL history to sell out every home game over the course of a season. Final home game against the Bulldogs in round 26. Sean Johnson and Charles Nicol-Klukstad return. Tuivasa-Sheck moves to the wing. Ed Cossey, Tamati Martin drop out of the side. Eels, no change from the side. The loss to the Storm last week. How do you see this one, Skip?
Yeah, look, it looks obvious to the Warriors. This one, look, Parramatta are probably the best last point or second last team at this point of the season I've ever seen. Like, there is, despite missing Mitch Moses, Jermaine Hopgood, they've still got a pretty talented team. Like, there's some good players in this team.
Well, they took it to the Storm last week.
Yeah, they did. And, there was a part early in that game, just before Melbourne took it the other way. If Dijon Arcee just passed it straight from the ground to Ryan Madison down that short side, before he made that little error trying to tip it onto, I think it was maybe Blaize Talagi.
Yep.
Then the Storm pick it up, go the other end, and then obviously go on with the game. I thought that was, that would have really given Parramatta a little bit more fight. I'm surprised with Tamati Martin being completely dropped out of the team.
I kind of get it. He played really well initially, but just some of his fifth tackle options, his kicking game, left a lot to be desired, to be honest.
Do you think the connection with him and Sean Johnson doesn't work as well?
Doesn't work, because he's not a 6, I don't think. Tamati Martin, to me, is not a 6. I thought for a period there he could be. I thought he really worked on his running game, but, it's one thing to do that for one game, but to do it for a whole season, it's a different thing. I think he's an out-and-out 7, and I just think that when it comes to his kicking game and his last tackle options, he just needs to work on that before he gets a crack. It's going to be interesting because, the Warriors haven't re-signed SJ yet. So who's 7 next year for him?
Have you seen some of the content that SJ's been doing? He's got his new podcast.
Yep, Play On.
Play On. I think he plays on. I think he plays on. Yeah.
But why hasn't the re-sign happened yet? What's going on there?
I think he's just waiting to see. It's one of those things. The play on.
But is that silly from the Warriors? Because let's say he decides not to, they've just wasted 3 months. They could have been in the market.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't thought about it from that end. I've been thinking about it. I get the feeling that Sean is maybe 80, 90% there, and he just needs to get that last 10%. It's been a season off a really good 2023 season where he's been riddled with injury, and he hasn't been healthy the entire year. And I was hearing reports that he was only doing one training session a week with a calf sort of Achilles injury in the off season. So that would have been super frustrating. I think a big part of it is Sean making sure that he's physically fit going into the 2025 season, and I think that'll be determined by how he finishes. I think he's leaning towards re-signing, and therefore that's why the Warriors probably are thinking the same, but it is super risky.
It's super risky.
Because if he doesn't re-sign, then
they are stuffed.
It's Chanel, Tamati Martin, and Luke Metcalf.
Yeah, which I don't think, they may be good, but are good enough to get them to a top 4 or a top 6 finish as to where they were.
And they got young Jet Cleary on the way too.
Which would be probably a couple of years or too early.
You'd think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'd think so, a year or 2 away. So I'm going to go over the Warriors, not with any confidence though. And shout out to the Warriors. That is an unbelievable stat.
Incredible. Best fans in the business.
I've always said, the Warriors fans, when they went on the up the Waz, when they're winning, this proves the that up the wires movement is just way bigger and has created something so big outside of what the normalcy is for a fan. And they've done a great job. And everyone involved in the club, because to lose games and be frustrated and not have the results of last year, a great job from everyone involved at the Warriors.
Dolphins v Roosters, Friday, 8 p.m, HBF Park, Perth. Dolphins team news, no changes to the side that lost to the Titans last week. The Roosters team news, Utoikamanu sets a return from his hand injury in the only change to the side that defeated Manly on Saturday night. Michael Jennings drops out through suspension. What do you reckon about this one, Skip?
How quickly do players come back now?
Mate.
When I heard that noise when Utoikamanu broke his hand through the audio through whoever was, whatever coverage I was watching on that, I was like, he'll be back in finals. It's crazy how quickly they get back now.
Mate, the science, the science that the players are dealing with these days, like, I don't think people realise, like, certain injuries that used to take 12 weeks genuinely take 6 weeks now.
Yeah.
Like, we are talking crazy science they put into it.
Yeah, and some of the treatment and also the protection, like Viliami Kikau, you see he's been carrying that broken hand as well like he was only out for like 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's insane.
Fractured his hand.
They've got machines now at clubs. Like, let's say you do your ACL or a leg machine, like your leg injury, where you're not supposed to be running. The reason why you can get back quicker is they got machines now. They're treadmills, but what they do is they're like almost in water, and you can put in like, okay, I want you to have 50% of your body weight.
Yep.
So basically what happens is that, let's say you've got a knee injury, you can get on this treadmill and you're actually only running with 10% of your body weight.
Yeah.
And so you can do the running motion without putting essentially any pressure on that muscle or whatever it is. And that's just one machine.
Yeah, that's one. Then before that, it used to be you could only do it in the pool, right? You'd go in the pool and run in the pool. That was it.
Yep.
Now, 10%. That sort of come in right at the back end of my career. But go to this game, Dolphins, they let that one drop against the Penrith Panthers a couple of weeks ago, and I think it affected them against the Titans last week. I think when the Titans started to come home strong, they started to feel a bit of a hangover from that, and they are probably coming up against one of the worst teams in the competition to play outside of the top two that actually bully teams when they feel like they're
so physical.
They physically go after teams that they know that they're better than, and they will, again, give themselves a good chance in this game. I don't know. Do you think the Dolphins have done enough this year or up until this point to suggest that they won't significantly drop off like they did last year?
Oh, it's a tough one. I think they've played good enough footy to scrape in the 8. I really do. I think Katoa has been incredible this year. I think he's been so good. It's just about, like, for example, last game, geez, they started well. They looked like a cut above the Titans, just a substantially better side. But for some reason, it's like maybe it's the bench rotation. When they come on, they don't have the same intensity, but they just dropped off quite dramatically. In regards to the Roosters, I think the biggest concern is like just 80-minute performances. Like, they come out and they blow teams off the park, and then they'll take their foot off the gas for a little bit, and then they'll finish them off. And I look at the Manly side, and some people praise the Roosters' performance against Manly, where they go, well, they defended their line for so long. Whereas I'm kind of the opposite. I think that, like, they came out, put 5 tries on them like it was nothing, and then they allowed Manly back into the match. And I just think that if they want to be a premiership threat, they got to sort that out by the end of the year, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm with you. I was very underwhelmed with both teams. I was underwhelmed with how easily the Roosters blasted through Manly. And then I was equally as unimpressed by the Roosters by not going on with it. Yeah. I think it goes back to, someone brought this up to me a couple of weeks ago, and I noticed it factoring in with why they struggle against Penrith and Melbourne. Long kicking game. They really struggle in the long kicking game. So, for instance, when you get to a 20-point-something lead against a team like Manly, you just strangle them, kick them to corners. They don't have the ability to do that.
Well, I think Robbo relies on the fact that his forward pack can make an extra 10 metres each set.
And the wingers too, and Teddy.
Yeah. And so I think he looks at it and goes, okay, well, most normal sides make about 40 metres a set. My side makes 45 metres every set.
Yep.
And so over the span of a game, that's an extra 100 kicking metres. And I think that that's where he looks to make, because they're so good at recruiting. They'd have to be aware of it.
Of course.
Like, they'd have to be aware that those long kicking game's not great.
For sure, and I think that was maybe factored into why Sam Walker probably spent a little bit of time in New South Wales Cup last year, and a guy like Drew Hutchinson was brought into the team. Now, he's not a Matty Burton sort of kicker, but he does kick the ball a lot further than him. But I will say, I think that's why they struggle against Penrith, because they can't blast through Penrith and Melbourne like they do every other team. They don't have that advantage where they can just roll the ruck, and the Penrith and Melbourne Storm system is a lot more.
What's funny as
cleaner.
well? Penrith and Melbourne. We say the wrestle's gone in this game, but Penrith and Melbourne are still the best wrestlers in the competition.
Penrith are the best now.
They are so good.
Penrith do such a good job of catching players and dragging them back, and they brought in that the grabbing the leg and lifting it lever. That was to combat what Penrith have been doing.
They drag you back 10 metres.
Because they were dragging players back all the time.
Which is smart. It's
very
so
good.
smart.
Very good, yeah. And they were doing it. Yeah, every team was trying to copy them. They just do it more consistently.
Yeah.
But anyway, back to this game, Roosters.
Yeah, I'm going to go Roosters. Titans, Broncos. This is Desi Hazler, sticks with the side that beat the Dolphins last week. Brimo, he's named in the reserves again. Corey Oates replaces Sol and Cobbo on the wing. Pia Cora returns after missing last week with a quad injury. Oh, look, people that think Broncos are going to go out and just blow them off the park, I don't think so. I think this is going to be a cracking match. I think this will be a 1-12 win either way. It's honestly almost 50-50 for me.
Yeah, I think it's a genuine coin flip. I'm leaning towards the Titans for a couple of reasons. When I watched the Broncos and Bulldogs game last week, I was kicking myself that I didn't back at this time of the year consistency over talent.
Yeah.
So I think Broncos are the more talented team this week and last week, but that wasn't the case. And I think the Titans, despite a little blip against the Manly Seagulls, have been a lot more consistent over a 4 to 5 week period that I've seen recently, where I think Desi is starting to get. I think he's figured out the biggest question mark that he's had the entire time with this Titans team was how they fit in Keanu Kinney, AJ Brimson and Jaden Campbell. I think Jaden Campbell is going to be their long-term 6 moving forward.
Man, how incredible that has been. Because I think we can all agree, we probably sat back and gone, I just don't know if he's big enough for the front line. And I'll put my hand up.
Yep.
And look, I still want to see a whole season. 4 or 5 games is so different to a whole season when it comes to physicality. But for what I've seen so far, he has far exceeded my expectations in defence.
Same as me, mate. 3 or 4 weeks ago, I'll go back to the Warriors game. They were very dominant. But the reason I was very reluctant to him being in the front line, the way he went after a couple of the back rowers in that game.
Yeah.
In particular, I was like, all right, this is okay. I thought it might just be one game. Then he backed it up the week after. And he's been really good. He's sort of been going looking for contact, and that's what you got to do sometimes when you're perceived to be a spot. Rather than just sitting back and letting people come at you,
go to them
a little bit, spook them, because it's not that what they would have expected. It wouldn't have been on the team sheet. And when you perceive someone to be a spot and they start checking you, you're like, well, what am I doing wrong?
All right, we've already got the text here, Scope. Denon, stop being biased. Broncos are gone. Titans win easy. So saying 50-50, that's being biased. There you go. Storm v Dragons. Saturday, 5:30, Amy Park. Munster returns to the starting side after starting last weekend on the bench. Wishart shifts to interchange. Fa'alongo drops out. Tyrell Sloan for the Dragons returns the fullback. Feeney is a sideline with a head knock. Couchman replaces a brother Toby, who was out through suspension. He'll be on the couch this week. Blake Laurie returns to the interchange in place of Murdoch Masilla, who has a foot injury. Storm. I mean, the biggest news for me with the Storm is Wishart getting that 14 role and Fa'alongo dropping out. Now, granted, in podcast on Monday, I thought that's what Craig Bellamy would do.
Yep. But
it's still a huge decision with how good Fa'alongo has been off the bench.
Yeah, I thought there was a world in which they both could have played.
Carried them both.
Yeah, I was thinking that could be the case. And I still think there might be certain matchups, certain games where he might implement that. Craig Bellamy's been the sort of guy too where he hasn't, he mixes it up a little bit. He's very game plan specific.
He's not as conservative as people think he is.
Nah, the beauty of the Melbourne Storm is they come in with a really specific game plan on a lot of teams. And with some teams, it might be having a little bit more versatility. When he's looking at the Dragons lineup, he might think they're big bodies. We're going to need some big bodies on the sideline. On the bench. So therefore, go with a bigger lineup. Missile brought this up to me on the Moles a couple of weeks ago, and it's the form of the Dragons. And it suggests that the Dragons are going to win this game. Because they've been the Dragons.
Every week in they flip. Yeah,
they've been win one week, lose the next week since week 9.
Mate, they're the most inconsistent side in the comp, but that's a good thing when you're looking at where they were.
They're the most inconsistently consistent team in the competition.
Because usually they'll have a terrible loss and they'll come out the next week and play like a bloody top 4 side.
Yeah.
I've loved the
some big
Dragons
teams,
this year,
some
mate.
big teams that they've knocked off during that.
Absolutely. The
Imagine if they could
Broncos,
do that
Penrith
just because
Panthers.
of this one streak. You think Melbourne Storm, right?
Surely.
It's a lock.
But I love the Dargans.
I like the Dargan streak. I love little things like this. I think it's cool. And you know all the chat around the Bulldogs at the start of the year with the 2024, 2014. Yeah, all that sort of jazz. I love all that stuff.
I cannot believe. I mean, we'll get to it, but I can't believe the Bulldogs actually might make top 4. Top 4! Mate, at the start of this year, if you had said top 8, I would have said that's a miracle. Anyway, we'll get to the Doggies. With the Dargans, what I love about them is like they're just... I love that Flanagan has like injected character. There's something happening. I just feel like for so many years with the Dargans, like it was the recruitment was safe, the game plans were safe and boring. Like there was no kind of risk and reward. Whereas I know they're inconsistent this year, but at least they're trying things.
They were playing a real negative style of footy. They were almost the OG team to do the old don't put the kick in, run it on the last.
Seriously.
Mate, remember about 3 or 4 years ago, I actually lived with a player from the Dragons and he told me.
No way.
That was their game plan, mate. They would get there and instead of risking a 7-tackle set when they first come in, because they were so, like the analytics around it and the percentages of how teams broke during that period, they were like the first team to go, let's continually run it. Now, a lot of teams do it.
Yep.
But I think the Dragons have gone the other way. Under Flano, I think they chance their arm a little bit more than what, probably some of the better teams do, which is good. It's entertaining, and therefore, it's probably why you see the inconsistent consistencies.
Yeah, mate.
Week in, week out.
I tell you what, we all had them on the bottom of the table. The Dragons deserve a massive rap this year.
I did. I had them bottom 2, mate. So, but I also love being proved wrong. I love,
100%.
at the start of the year when you do your predictions and you see a team fly. It's so good.
I'm going Storm here, but yeah, Sharkies versus the Rabbitohs Saturday, 7:30, Shark Park. Shark team news: Kennedy returns from suspension. Fullback Mulatalo knee injury sees Sam Stonestreet brought on the wing. Royce Hunt returns after missing last weekend with an injury. Hazelton drops out with a foot injury. Rabbitohs team news: Cam Murray returns from his Origin suspension, moving Tallis Duncan to the bench. Fletcher Myers makes his NRL debut on the wing in place of injured Alex Johnston. Richie Kenner returns from concussion in centres, moving Michael Cheeham to the bench. What do you reckon, Sharks v Rabbitohs, mate?
I think this is another genuine coin flip for the two players. One, Cam Murray's back for the Rabbitohs. That makes South Sydney so much better. And I think Ronaldo Mulatalo, his presence and his leadership in that team, I think that'll be sorely missed for Cronulla. I think he's probably one of the more underrated players with regards to the impact that he has on the team. He's very emotional guy. He has some moments where come on, he lets his emotion get the best of him.
Yep.
But I still think he's a really important part of that team, and I think he'll be missed.
Oh, Matt, I think he's the heart of their team. I think he's similar-ish to like a Critter in the outside backs where, he's the pulse. He's the pulse. When things are going well for Mulatalo, things are going well for the whole team. When things are going bad for Mulatalo, things are going bad for the team.
If he's chirping at someone, Cronulla are travelling.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Look, I'm going to go the Sharkies in this one, but I do think the Rabbitohs, if the conditions are good, and why I say this is like I didn't tip them against the Raiders because we're talking Sunday night, 6 p.m. down in Canberra, freezing cold, you've got nothing to play for. That's the perfect ingredients for a team to just go, stuff it with the Rabbitohs. Whereas I do think we're going to find games with the Rabbitohs in the last few weeks where it's going to be a fast track, beautiful night or day, and they're going to be like, nothing to lose. Let's just play a footy. And they're going to put a few teams to the sword because they got the side to do it.
Yeah, I agree. And it's going to be it'll be similar to the Tigers game where it'll be a points fest and they'll just be happy to score 36 to 28 or
and
something
just have
like
fun.
that.
Because the season's over. They're not going to win the spoon. Not going to get close to winning the spoon.
I'm going to go the Rabbitohs in this one. I think they can pull it off in this game. I'm the same as you. I didn't have them against the Canberra Raiders for the reasons that you said. But they were missing both their star player and captain.
Yep.
They get their captain back this week.
Now, the Sharkies. I'll tell you what, if you ever needed an example of how important it is to bank wins at the start of the season, look at the Sharkies.
Yeah.
Because you look at their last 8 games, it's like 2 from 8 or 1 from 8. It's really, really poor reading. And they're still in the top 4.
They're getting wobbly, aren't they? They're getting wobbly. I thought I loved the performance of Braden Trindle last week, actually, against the Cowboys. I thought he really went after that game. It wasn't super clean, but I just look for little effort areas sometimes, and the way he was. I like it when I'm looking at a player and he looks like he's completely gassed.
Yeah.
So for me, not necessarily about the actions or what led to that, is that he's leaving it all out there. And I feel like Braden Trindle, since the Nico injury, and even before that, actually, when he missed some time with the calf injury early on and around Origin period, has really been going after the games.
Do you think he's an out-and-out 7 and not a 6? Because my concern with Trindle is that he has grown up being the main man, number 7. And my worry is that Hines and him, they've tried to gel. It just hasn't seemed to work so far. And that when Hines does come back, the question is Trindle is a better player than Atkinson, but does he complement Hines better than Atkinson?
It's a good question. It's a really good question. We're yet to be seen. I do have faith in them too.
Yep.
I had little faith going into the season.
Okay.
I seen enough during that period when they were travelling, before the injury and before the off-field issue that Trindle had.
Yep.
I think I'd seen enough during that period where I thought they could complement each other. Now, it doesn't look great in the last few weeks, but they haven't played together much at all. So I do think they can work long term.
I watch him play now as a 7. He looks so much more comfortable. Whereas when he's playing 6, I just feel that sometimes him and Hines, they just don't seem to be clicking. And I was actually, heading into the season, I was really positive on it.
Oh, you were the opposite.
Yeah, I thought it was really going to work. But as I said, I look at everything, the body language, the energy. When he's in that 7 jersey, it's completely different to when he's in that 6 jersey. So I just worry that if he kills it at 7, it almost might mean a bad thing for him, because then they might go, okay, he's an out-and-out 7. Maybe we need to put Atkinson. But we'll see. I think that if I had to bet on it, when Hines does come back, they will move him to 6. But it will be a question that in that week or 2 that Hines is back, if it doesn't work out, Atkinson might get put in there.
I've always been big on the jerseys. The jersey number really doesn't matter as long as there's communication around the detail of what they do as a partnership. I think sometimes players can wear the different numbers and it not change to. Remember when Roosters were stuffing around with the Kiri 7 and 6 and moved? They swapped their jersey numbers.
Yeah.
It's like it doesn't really matter about the number on the back as much as long as there's a more clear and clear role from both in what their roles are specifically as halves in the team.
Panthers v Knights, Sunday, 2 p.m, Panthers Stadium. Panthers team news. Fisher Harris knee injury brings Lindsay Smith into the starting side. Eisenhuth recalled onto the bench. Iongi makes his NRL debut. That's Isaiah Iongi. Debut at fullback with Edwards and Laurie, both sideline with injury. I tell you what, you want to watch a bloke with good footwork, this kid can move. Unbelievably explosive.
Kalen Ponga.
Knights team news. Hastings has been dropped with Phoenix Crossland taking over at halfback. Mate. First of all, I love Crossland getting more game time because I'm a massive Crossland fan.
Yeah.
But a guy comes out of school, he's basically Australian 7. They force him in to become a utility, kills it at 9, and now all of a sudden he's playing 7 again. I don't know what's going on there. Jaden Bradley returns at hooker. Best is out with a hamstring injury. Dylan Lucas shifts to the centres with Adam Elliott joining the back row on his return from a calf complaint. And Cogger joins the bench. Look, with the Knights, I don't know what's happening up there, to be honest. I think that we're actually going to see a lot of pain before some almost regrowth. The fact that Cogger gets signed, all this drama happens in, out of the side. Now he joins the bench and you've got Crossland starting at 7. I just can't understand the thought process.
Surely Cogger starts in this, right? Are we assuming that Cogger's going to start in this?
Then what's this whole...
Then why name him on the bench?
Yeah.
So they can be secretive against the Penrith Panthers and somehow get a leg up on them? I don't know. You'd think Cogger would start and they'd be looking at him long term if they are indeed shipping Jackson Hastings off. Because... You're right. Like you said, Phoenix Crossland had come through as a half. He finally started looking really good and consistent last year in the 9 jersey. And there were reports with O'Sullivan now in the building that a few senior players had been given the tap on the shoulder, one of those being Brayley. So you just assume Cogger at 7, right? Crossland at 9 and then Brayley off the bench if he's been shopped around.
Yeah.
That makes the most sense.
Yep.
Whether those reports are true, we don't know. But unfortunately... They're not going to figure it out this weekend because they're playing the Penrith Panthers.
I think it's going to be a tough game. Very, very tough game. I don't see them winning. I don't see it being close, to be honest. I think Panthers absolutely dominate this. I think Panthers are starting to feel, finals footy around the corner. They understand that they can't wait until finals footy arrives to be in finals footy form. They need to build into it. They've been there. They've done it. They know exactly what to do to get ready for finals footy.
What a luxury it is to have the best player in the world not play a significant amount of games in the last 2 or 3 years in Origin. He missed a number of Origins which he would have played in. Therefore, once the Origin series finished, he has a chip on his shoulder because Queensland have beaten New South Wales, and he felt like if he was there, he could have played a part in it. Now he's also got a chip on his shoulder because Mitch and Jerome got the job done. So that's equally going to pee him off.
Yep.
And it's just unfair for everyone else in the competition.
And also, now Fisher Harris is going to have 2 to 3 weeks off, which is actually perfect because he was going to be ready and raring to go for the final series.
They're going to win 4 in a row.
I think they might. Okay, now the Doggies versus the Raiders. Sunday, 4 p.m, Belmore Sports Ground. Bulldogs team news. Crichton, Josh Adokar both returned from injury, which is interesting because the reports that I had read was Crichton had done nerve damage and that it was indefinite. But even the great guru on Monday said, no, he'd been hearing that Stephen Crichton is back, and he is back. Adokar returns from injury. Kiraz returns to the wing. Wilson and Skelton both drop out. No changes from the team that defeated the Rabbitohs for the Raiders. How do you see this one, mate?
This is where I like iron sharpens iron, Beak. This is, in the outside backs, you got to feel sorry for Skelton and Blake Wilson, who've been really good in filling in for these senior players. But, geez, it makes them look that much harder. I feel like this is going to be tricky. Bulldogs there were no expectations on them going to Brisbane, in my opinion.
Which was bizarre to me.
Externally, internally, they would have had for sure. They would have thought they could have gone up and did the job that they did to the Broncos up there, which is crazy because of how consistent they've been when you think about it. And again, it's why I was kicking myself watching that game. The Raiders are 2 from 2 with Fogarty back. They're gritty.
Well, that's the thing. I think that the Raiders are almost the perfect team to play the Dogs because they are also gritty. You know what I'm saying?
In terms of the Bulldogs getting a really good finals type win and game and then being able to kick, like, you think it's a positive for the Dogs that they're playing a gritty team like the Raiders because that's the sort of footy they want to play?
Well, no, I think the Raiders suit playing against the Bulldogs.
I agree.
Yeah, because they're a gritty pack that wants to get down and dirty.
I agree.
They don't want to, go side to side.
These two teams would both be really happy with winning a game 8-6, 10-6, something like that. They're like, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But they would both be going into that game with this mindset.
Yeah. I guess the concerning thing for the Raiders is the Bulldogs out of nowhere went up to Brisbane and said, how everyone's said that we're a defensive-based team. Well, actually, here's some of the best attacking footy you've ever seen. And so that's where I think if the Bulldogs can replicate that, then maybe they do put a bit of a score on. But I do think that the Raiders will drag them down into the mud. And I think that the natural instinct of the Bulldogs will be like, we love that. That's what we built our brand on this year. Yeah. And I think it's going to be a dogfight for at least 60 minutes.
Yeah, you're right. You've got to have versatility too, like to not only win this game, but if Bulldogs have aspirations of, being a tricky team, if they do indeed manage to get that 4th position, they've got to be able to win games in multiple ways. And, even though I was kicking myself about not picking the Bulldogs in that game, there's no way I envisioned them playing that the way they did. I thought it was going to be... I
thought they'd just frustrate Broncos.
Yes, into a 16-14, 16-10 game like I think this game's going to be. But, I'm going to go the Bulldogs because they're at home.
What about the Raiders? I'm such an admirer of them as a club. They're currently sitting 9th and they're on equal points to the Dolphins in 8th. Them heading into this year, I had them as my biggest sliders. And once again, Ricky Stewart's Raiders just battle, fight, out of side, don't get appreciated, don't get the headlines, and they still find themselves within striking distance of a top 8 finish.
I think they've got some of my, in terms of young players, some of my favourite young players in the competition right now, and some really, not that he's underrated, Joseph Tarpany, but he's one of my favourite players to watch.
I think he's underrated. I really do.
Yeah.
To the wider audience, I think he is.
Yeah, to the wider audience, you're correct.
I think that a lot of people would look at Payne Haas and Adam Fanor-Blake and, even Fisher Harris and Leota and go, they're the top tier forwards. Tarpany is in the same category as them.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, you go back, you watch Australia versus New Zealand and that record win, guess who the best player on the field was?
Yeah,
It was Tarpany.
And Fisher Harris was really good as well. But those are... And then even a guy like Elliot Whitehead, 200 games after playing, feels like 500 in the Super League before he'd got here. He's one of my favourites to watch.
Legend of a bloke too.
Yeah, just a good human. You're right. I love Ricky. It feels like Ricky every year does this to a player where a player that had high expectations hadn't quite lived up to it. They get a reality check, and I'm talking about Xavier Savage.
Yeah.
And I think Xavier Savage is going to be in contention for the Maroons next year.
Okay.
Yeah, that's my early crow.
Okay.
That is my early prediction. I just love the way he's attacking games, his physicality.
Yeah. He's rounding his game out.
He has,
Yeah.
and it's more effort. So
Yeah.
instead of doing the pretty plays, which we were accustomed to a couple of years ago, it's effort plays that have been really standing out for him. So, I think he's going to be not make the team, maybe game one, but be a part of the Origin discussion.